Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Economy and Resources Committee. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off video when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, please write speak in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you please to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or to write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you're able to rejoin us, as this will allow us to monitor member presence. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we will deal with business in our usual efficient manner. Before we proceed to that, I have three things I wish to cover. The first is that all members will, of course, be aware of the very sad and untimely death of Patsy Gilroy, former councillor and convener of Dumfries and Galloway Council. I understand the leader will afford us all the opportunity to reflect on Patsy and her contribution to our region at full council on Thursday. But members, I'm sure, will forgive me for taking this opportunity to record my own appreciation of her service to our region. And that was a considerable and illustrious service. I also wanted to reference the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal, which was announced last week, and the opportunities for sustained investment in our region, along with partners, to support our local economy, business and communities. Borderlands, of course, has had cross-party support and from both UK and Scottish governments, and all members in this committee have been engaged in consideration of the deal and its business cases. I look forward to progress on delivery of the deal and the investments that will entail. Finally, today marks the first anniversary of the first UK lockdown in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and as such, it is a day of national reflection. I would intend, therefore, if we are still in session at the time, that we observe a minute's silence at 12 noon, which will be a moment in which to reflect on everything that has happened in the past year. With that, members, we will move on to the agenda. Nick, can you provide the siderant and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the only apology, and it's an apology for lateness I'm aware of, is from the Vice Chair, Councillor Driver, who hopes to join us during the meeting. All members of the committee are present, barring, and this may have changed since I've updated my list, but I'm not seeing Councillor Brodie, McClelland, Sloan or Tate, but all other members are present remotely.
Thank you, Nick. I can advise that Councillor McClelland hopes to be able to join us later. Okay, with that, I will move on to declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to declare an interest on item 6, which is the Chapplecross site transformation update. I actually work for the main contractor and site licence holder at the Chapplecross site, which is Magnox, but they are not one of the signatories in the MOU. The NDA are the owners of the site, so I will be staying in for the item.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I too have a declaration of interest in item 8 with reference to Appendix 3. My daughter is a member of the Birchfield Theatre Group, and my fiancé is employed by South of Scotland Community Housing, formerly known as Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. That's with reference to the Clock Tower project in Castle Douglas. However, as we are asked to note the allocations to these projects, I do not intend to leave the meeting. I will just pause and check in case there are any other declarations of interest. I see Councillor Brodie has joined the meeting. Welcome, Councillor Brodie. Thank you, members. I'll move to the minute of the previous meeting of 26 January 2021. That is here for approval. Are we content to approve that minute, please? I will take it that we are. Turning then to item 4, COVID-19 Business Support Fund Update, a report by Head of Economy and Development. we are presented with a further update on support for local businesses within the COVID-19 Strategic Framework Fund and through other sectoral business support funding which has been provided by the Scottish Government. Summary of the action taken to deliver the framework funding and other funds to be administered by local government is provided alongside information on activity and resources. We're also provided with information on the demands upon the discretionary funding provided to the Council and advised of the quadrupling of that fund. Officers will provide us with a further update on all of these matters today, and members will, I trust, have received the addendum to this report circulated by Mr Evans yesterday evening, which provides further detail on this issue in particular, and which requires and suggests a change to recommendation 5, but we will address that in detail when we come to the recommendations. Steve Rogers and David Gardner are here to assist if members have any questions. Before I turn to them to ask if there are any further updates they wish to add, as I anticipate there might be, I would want to place on record my appreciation and gratitude for the amount of effort and hard work that has gone into this very substantial undertaking, effectively since the lockdown we hope to exit very shortly was announced at the beginning of this year. That work has been considerable, and I think it's important that we express our appreciation for the staff who've worked exceedingly hard to get us to the point where we are now. However, with that, Steve, is there anything that you would like to provide by way of further updates before we go to questions, please?
Chair, thank you, and good morning, members. As you say, really the update was circulated in writing this time. Members will be aware that in the case of previous update reports on the business grants situation, because it's been such a fast-changing environment that we've been working in, we have provided with a verbal update at the committee meeting. However, in view of the fact that there was so much information that we would be seeking to provide, we felt it might be more helpful to members if we provided that in a written form, hence the circulation yesterday of the addendum. There is, Chair, one minor correction to the paragraph numbering to point out in relation to the addendum. It's probably as well just to pick that up at this point before we go any further. So on page 2 of the addendum, beneath the heading Contingency Fund, the paragraph number 3.5.7 should read 3.5.6. Other than that, Chair, happy for myself and David to assist with any questions that members might have.
Thank you, Steve. See that now. So I'll go to questions from members. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Like yourself, I'd like to thank the staff. When you read through these figures, we've got through a power of work going through all these grants, and I know from speaking to a lot of local business people, have been very grateful for the support they've actually managed to receive this time round. I'm also keen to say that I support the request for the extra funding. I'm glad that in this instance the funding has been distributed, because there'd be nothing worse than having funds allocated to us and then we're back in a situation of having to return them. So I'm very grateful that we've actually managed to get through this, and I see the sign that they're asking for the extra funding from policy and resources, the finance and procurement, sorry, as a positive step in a lot of ways. So that's very encouraging. And the question I'd really like to ask is, we're saying if we get allocated extra money, have we given any consideration to potentially lobbying for any money? And the next question is, when do we expect an update on the forthcoming support that was recently announced?
Thank you, Malcolm. Steve, can you assist with those points, please? I'll take the point on lobbying, but with regard to Malcolm's second point.
Yes, certainly, and I'll bring David Gardner in if he's got more up-to-date information. But in terms of the additional funding that was announced by the First Minister last week, this relates to the possibility of a restart grant, which would be an additional top-up payment effectively to all those businesses that are currently on the Strategic Framework Fund. And it's really in anticipation of the reopening of the economy and businesses with those key dates, in particular the 26th of April and the 17th of May, which will see much more widespread reopening of businesses. The government is keen for local authorities to make some additional payments during April to presumably to help businesses meet with the costs of that restart process. David, I don't know if there's anything further to add.
Just pause to see if David's able to comment. Perhaps there are some connection problems. So far as the question of lobbying is concerned, I think I'm in agreement with you, Malcolm. I regard this as being an ongoing process. I don't believe that we've got to the end of the allocations and announcements that we're likely to see throughout the remainder of this calendar year. With ordinary luck focused on restart, if things continue to go well. And I think there's absolutely a role for us individually as a council and collectively through COSLA to be ensuring that we are making the case for the funding that we require. And also, in my view, given our experience of it, that we are able to exercise discretion in how it is dispersed. My own view on this, certainly, I'm keen to hear from other members, but my own view on this is that we've been able to exercise that discretion in a judicious and inclusive way, which I think has been genuinely helpful. So I hope that is of some assistance. I'll turn to Councillor Marshall next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Really just like to put on record the thanks, probably myself and other probably elected members, with the fantastic effort that the limited pool of council staff that we've been able to use to carry out the processing of the applications, and also the applying the due diligence that requires. My question though is as well, obviously there's been a huge influx of applications, etc. And I'm just interested as well, obviously not every application will be successful after due diligence has been applied. And I'm just wondering, really to kind of gauge the level of, the staff are working under pressure as it is, but I'm just wondering, has there been quite a high level of unpleasant and indeed unreasonable dealings with applicants or indeed elected members, and what effect that could or has had on staff?
Thanks, Sean. Steve, do you want to comment?
Chair, I think first of all, thank you for the comments about the work of the team. I think the team have done a tremendous job, not just during this current round of business support, but also during the previous round of business supports that we distributed last year. I think it's been a tremendous effort by all the staff involved, and credit is due to them. In terms of the issue of communication with applicants, I think there is certainly a recognition amongst staff that a lot of local businesses have been in a very, very difficult and stressful predicament created by the lockdown restrictions on their business. So there is an understanding and a recognition that these are very stressful times, and the staff try to be as supportive as possible. But inevitably, there are occasions when those stresses bubble up to the surface. But I can assure you that those those communications have always been handled extremely professionally by the team.
Thank you, Steve. I think the point about recognising the amount of pressure that this piece of work has placed on our resources and on our staff, I think is important that we do recognise. It has been a huge amount of work to get through against very, very demanding deadlines. I think it would be fair to say. We'll go to Councillor Hagman next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, for that. I see David Gardner has joined the meeting now. So I just really want to put my thanks to David, the team, yourself, Steve, because, yeah, I recognise all the points that you have made this morning. And, yeah, I think the point raised just there about the fact that businesses are under a lot of stress, individuals are under a lot of stress. I, as an elected member, have been contacted by various businesses and individuals who are really stressed and are feeling very anxious. And I am aware that on occasions that has been taken out on the teams. So I guess my question really is, well, first of all, it's a thanks to David, because he has been absolutely incredible. Whenever I've had an issue, he has always been there to help and resource that. But I'm also conscious, is that the best way to resolve individual cases? Is there a better way that elected members should be contacting the team to ensure that we as elected members aren't putting more pressure on the team? Is there a specific email? Because I'm conscious that if we all contact one officer or two officers, then the pressure can then mount on them as well. So I want to be here to be supporting officers, but also supporting my constituents and the businesses within my ward. So my question is quite a simple one. Who is the best person, or what is the best email address, and can that be circulated to all members so that we can not cause more pressure, I guess, on the team? So if that could possibly be circulated to all members, that would be really useful.
Thank you, Katie. I think that's a helpful point. Steve, can we do that, please?
Chair, yes, we can certainly do that. What I would say is that we do have the existing EMES portal, and I would encourage members to use the EMES portal, which then allows us to allocate the inquiries out to staff rather than them all coming into one individual member of staff. So that would certainly be helpful. And again, recognising. Thank you, Councillor Hagman, for those comments and remarks about the work of the team and the work of David in leading that team. And I can certainly add my own personal thanks to all of the staff involved in that process.
Thank you, Steve. I do not believe that I have any further requests to speak. I will pause just to ensure that I'm correct in that. Okay, that being the case, we will then turn to recommendations. Can I check that members have sight, whether it be by email, or I see that Mr. Evans has also included in the chat the addendum, since that includes the suggested change to recommendation 5. If any member hasn't got sight of that at the moment, can they advise me now? Okay, I will take it that we do. So we'll turn to the recommendations. Are we content to... have you got it, Councillor Nicholson? Yes, I see you do. Excellent. So are we content to note 2.1, the position of the COVID-19 Strategic Framework Fund as outlined in section 3.4?
Noted.
Thank you. And content to note at 2.2, the progress of the other sector funding support schemes. That's as at section 3.5. And at 2.3, note the additional allocation of discretionary funding for 2020-21 provided by the Scottish Government, as at section 3.6.2. At 2.4, note the position on the delivery of the Dumfries and Galloway discretionary fund at section 3.6, following approval of the screening criteria at this committee, and also the large number of applications received and in progress. It's very much as we have discussed. And then at recommendation 2.5, this is the new recommendation as in the addendum, which I will read out so we have it for clarity. Agree that an allocation of up to £700,000 COVID-19 monies from 2021 funding is requested from Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee to ensure all eligible applicants to the discretionary fund can be supported as described at paragraph 3.6.6 and 3.6.8. Are we content to agree that?
Agreed.
2.6 then, agree that if Scottish Government provides further funding for business support in the new financial year at the discretion of the Council, then a further report on the application of this funding would be brought to this committee to determine, that's as outlined in paragraph 3.6.7. And I am going to chance my arm slightly and suggest that we may wish to add a recommendation 2.7 that the committee notes its gratitude and appreciation to the team and its managers for their efforts in supporting this vital piece of activity in terms of supporting regional the region's economy through this difficult period. That wording is perhaps not entirely elegant, but I'm sure that we can adjust it for the record. I see that we've got broad agreement across the piece on that as well. I do think it's important that we record that too. With that, Steve, David, thank you very much. We will move on to item 5. Well, members, item 5 is Local Development Plan 2, Supplementary Guidance and Conservation Area Review, report by Head of Economy and Development. This report advises members of the comments received on the mineral resources and in Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan Supplementary Guidance Consultations. The report also provides an overview and proposed way forward following a review of the conservation areas across the region. Shona McCoy is here to assist if members have any questions. Shona, is there anything you want to add at this point, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just we've got an issue with our paragraph numbering as well in the last recommendation. It should refer to paragraph 3.17 and not 3.18 as stated in the report. That's the only update. Thank you.
3.17, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'll invite members' questions and comments. Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just looking at the report and obviously it mentions that in conservation area, which is within my ward. I think, like most members, I agree with the concept of implementation of conservation areas. But at the same time, I'm just looking at page 33 of the summary of comments, particularly from Historic Environment Scotland, with regards to the Annan conservation area, and it says that it's important purpose of the conservation area designation is to protect enlisted buildings and to ensure that no building that contributes to the character of the CA is demolished without good reason. And you know, I can accept that, but at the same time, I think there needs to be a balance and a flexibility because, for example, in Annan, there is a lot of public concern around 3 listed buildings that have been derelict and in some state for a number of years, and they are namely Albert Hall in Port Street, the Erskine Church in Bank Street, and the Central Hotel in St John's Road. So, you know, when it says that, you know, one of the purposes is of a conservation area is to enhance the area, sometimes these listed buildings actually detract from the conservation area, and I think there needs to be more flexibility built in to allow us to do things that are normally restricted by having a conservation placed on an area. So I just wish, I don't know if Shona can give me any kind of comfort in how we can progress, because it's not just in Annan, it's across the region. Let's face it, we've had experiences over the years of a number of prominent listed buildings that have caused a lot of angst and concern to the council. So I just wondered if she'd like to comment on that, please.
Thank you, Shona. I do recognise the issue. Shona, is there anything you could advise on that, please?
I was actually going to say, if it's okay, I'd like to bring in my colleague, Mizzy Marshall, who's the Senior Planner for Historic Built Environment, who's also on the call, who deals with these particular issues. So if that's okay, if Mizzy's able to respond.
Yes. please, by all means, welcome, Lizzie.
Thank you.
If you can
Thank you,
assist.
Chair.
Hi, yes. Well, first of all, for demolition in a conservation area or of a listed building, there's a whole set of national policy and policy set out in the local development plan, and there are a series of conditions to be met which would allow demolition to happen, and some of those are for economic regeneration purposes. But the other point is that people who own listed buildings, they don't want to pay for the demolition of the building unless there's some kind of economic return on the site. So part of the issue is not just the condition of the building, it's also the fact that the site doesn't have a future use. So there's a bit of a mix there, but I do take the point that listed buildings, they're not always sacrosanct. I mean, we set out with the intention to retain them, but in the end, it can't always be done. But for the majority of the time, we should have that approach, in my opinion, and that's what the policy says.
Can I come back, Rob? It's just, I totally accept that, and I know that there's a set of procedures that need to go through to try and get something done with these derelict buildings, but I'm also kind of frustrated with, and it's probably Scottish Government policy with regards to what we can do to, and I think Marie mentioned it, is about some owners that are not willing to do anything whilst the derelict buildings start to fall into disrepair and indeed endanger the public. I mean, we've had a situation at Sentinel Hall where we've had building standards that can only do a limited amount to make the building safe. And, you know, to do anything more, then you're then trying to actually get that expenditure back off sometimes speculative owners of these buildings. So I'm just a little bit frustrated because I think all local authorities have got very limited powers with regards to what we can do with derelict buildings, and it probably needs a change at a government level to allow us to have more powers. But it is very frustrating to members of the public because when they ask what can be done, the answer is really very little.
Thanks, Sean. I do recognise the problem, and we have both been present at debates when I think our colleague who's much missed from the chamber, certainly Alistair Geddes, would talk about derelict buildings on a regular basis, and I think it is an issue that we still grapple with. I am certainly myself supportive of a more interventionist approach, I have to say, because I recognise the blight that derelict properties can bring to any town centre. I suspect this is an issue that we will continue to grapple with in years to come. I saw Councillor Carruthers' hand raised before I saw Councillor Brodie in the chat, so I'll go to Councillor Carruthers next, please.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a similar point to what Councillor Marshall's raised, but from a different angle, I suppose. So what I didn't see within the report, I don't remember seeing either as a local member. So we're lucky in this committee, they've got all 4 local Annandale South members there. So we've got 4 councillors from this particular area. But it's the involvement, whether it was area committee, whether it was Annan Regeneration Steering Group, whether it was community council, we've got one response to need. That sends out a bit of a signal to me, Chairman, that says that, so we're maybe not communicating the best way we could have. Okay, with COVID's there, but so all 4 councillors in Annandale South have written, and Sean's kind of reflected, written too, I should say, and Sean's reflected that as a local member, and I think a lot of us share those similar concerns that what the local constituent has raised, and along with what Sean's raised. So I would like to see this, unless I can be told otherwise. I don't remember seeing it at area committee, any kind of consultation there, and the Regeneration Steering Group. I could well quite easily have made that. Missed that, sorry, but Annan Community Council either. And there's 2 or 3 local worthies, you could say, you could describe them as in Annan, that definitely would have picked up on this as a consultation and would have engaged in the Chair. So for me, that's been missing, and if it has been missing, I could be completely wrong here. I think it's something we should reflect on and go back before we put this to ministers.
Thanks, Ian. So clarity on the process. Certainly, we agreed that it would go out to consultation at a previous meeting of this committee. Perhaps we could get clarification on the means by which that is then promoted to the public, please. Shona, can you assist with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's my understanding that when we went out to consultation, we wrote directly to the Community Council. We wrote to other parties who had an interest, and Mizzy will be able to advise exactly who that was. We also advertised in local newspapers, and I'm sure we did speak, or we made Annan Regeneration Steering Group aware of the consultation that was being done on the Annan camp. Mizzy can correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, we definitely went to the Regeneration Steering Group, and I can't bring up all my list right now. There are too many screens open. But as far as I know, we've done what we always do with the consultations, but we've given this a little bit of extra time. So it has been available on the website since the beginning of December, and we would have contacted everybody who is expected to be contacted, and usually a few extra people. I can provide that list if you like, but clearly it's up to councillors to direct us differently if they would like us to do further consultation.
Okay, thank you. Ian, did you want to come back on that?
Please, if you don't mind. I mean, it's up to the committee, obviously, through yourself, Chairman, but the area committee was the only thing that wasn't really referenced. So I know they've done the usual due diligence, went out and engaged to the best they can. I get the feeling for the level of, I suppose, eyebrows being raised locally, that it's something that the local community would be interested in, at least making comments in, and I think Sean's reflected some of them comments. Maybe Councillor Bourie's of the same mind, but we're lucky that we do have 4 Annandale South councillors on this particular committee, and so you can hear a local opinion there. But I've got nothing against what's being proposed, but I think there's some comments that maybe need better reflected, and even a bit of debate and discussion around. So it might be an option to go back to the committee even. Thank you, Chair.
I would want to have my memory refreshed as to whether sending these to the area committee is our standard practice, certainly. But I will perhaps invite governance to check on that while I go to Councillor Brodie. Councillor Brodie, you're next on my list.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to support the comments by Councillor Marshall and Councillor Brothers. It is a frustrating process. We have these conservation areas, but we don't really have any powers to enforce, to improve the buildings. We don't have a budget to support businesses because it is it's a difficult process and expensive process looking after listed buildings. So that's very frustrating. I was going to comment also on the consultation. I did get one member of the public from Annan, well, I got copied into Councillor Marshall's email about the proposals, but I think that comment was generated by the report, by today's report. So obviously it's an important issue. Perhaps it should be fully discussed at the Annan Regeneration Steering Group, because we haven't met for a number of months because of staff resources. But we could have a discussion on it. At least I don't think it would affect the recommendation today, because they are what they are. And Historic Environment Scotland have their comments, I think, have been well made, and we are taking them on board.
So I'm happy to consider that when we get to the recommendations. I think it probably would change what we are deciding today, but I have a sizable list of speakers, so I wish to hear from them all before we turn to the recommendations. Councillor McComb, you're next on my list, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 30, paragraphs 315 and 316. Is there not a fundamental inconsistency between the treatment of settlements where removal of the conservation area is being proposed and those where a change in the conservation area boundary is being suggested? In the first case, the householders have no consultation rights whatsoever. In the second one, the community will be consulted.
Thank you, Councillor McComb. Shona, can you assist with that point, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can make my internet's playing up a little bit. We when we were writing this report, we did double check that because it did seem a bit inconsistent to ourselves, but it's certainly what is set out in the listed building and conservation area Scotland Act 1997, is that if you are proposing to remove the conservation area status, you don't have to undertake community consultation, whereas if you're creating a conservation area or amending the boundary of an existing conservation area, as members may recall we did with the Moffat one last year, you have to undertake community consultation. So certainly we're following what is set out in the Act with regards to this.
Yes, but surely it would be a common courtesy to afford a consultation to the 5 small communities where the conservation area boundary is proposed to be eliminated.
I mean, if members would like us to do that, we can certainly do that. I mean, it's been the recommendation to remove the conservation area status from those 5 locations was based on a survey that was done of them in terms of the character and appearance since they were first designated in the 1970s or the 1980s, and it was our professional opinion that they no longer warranted that status. But if elected members would like us to undertake consultation on the delisting or the removal of the conservation area, we can certainly do that.
I would certainly have thought that the residents deserve the right to be heard. It may well be they're quite happy to do away with the conservation area, but on the other hand, at the moment, as proposed, they're not being given the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor McComb. I recognise 1997 is now quite an elderly piece of legislation. I mean, I do note that in 3.15 we propose to advise the addresses contained within the conservation areas, although that's expressed in terms of notifying them. Shona, is there any intention that we would invite comments on that, or is that simply a letter given notice?
I mean, it's simply a letter giving notice that the intention is to remove the conservation area status. As it says in the paragraph, there's no requirement for public consultation, but as to the extent of what the public consultation would be, we would need to consider that further depending what members have instructed us to do. What was set out in the paragraph is what's set out in the relevant legislation.
I think that is a fair point. Clearly, would expect officers to be guided by the legislation that provides our frameworks. However, I am certainly relaxed about the prospect if members wish to undertake consultation on the removal of the conservation areas. It's not statutory, but there is no reason I think why we should not. And again, perhaps that's something we'll wish to return to in the recommendations. Councillor McComb, do you want to come back?
I've heard what you've said, Chair, and I would certainly be in agreement with the principle of the residents in these 5 communities being given the opportunity to have their say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McComb. I'll turn to Councillor Hagman next, please.
Thank you, Chair. That was good timing that I put my name in after Councillor McComb because it's on exactly the same point, and I would support what Councillor McComb was saying. I appreciate that there's no requirement for public consultation, but like Councillor McComb, it would be a courtesy I think that we can do. We talk often about the council working with the communities and not doing to the communities, and I think this is a perfect example that we should be perhaps not doing a full public consultation, but at least engagement and engaging perhaps with the community council. And it may well be of the opinion of the community that they wish the de-designation of these small settlements. But yes, I would be very much supportive of having some level of engagement done within the communities, because there's no evidence of an appeals process, or if you know a group of residents say that have a strong feeling, there's no option for them to appeal that. So certainly, yes, I would like to very much support the points raised by Councillor McComb. Thank you.
I can only assume that whoever framed the legislation in 1997 assumed that there would be more concern about the creation of conservation areas than their removal. Maybe that was an errant assumption on their part. However, I'll turn to Councillor Johnson next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's been quite an interesting couple of points brought up there about the removal of the conservation areas. The point I on the whole welcome this kind of pragmatic approach to this sort of issue that we're taking, but equally, just because you don't have to doesn't mean you shouldn't. So I think engagement would be important. I think it's something that we should be doing more regularly, really, with a lot of issues. But the next thing is, when it comes to a lot of the points that were made by Councillor Marshall is 100% correct. And the worrying thing is, in the current climate, a lot of these situations are potentially only going to get worse with closed retailers and things in a lot of the town centres. So what I would like to know is any consultation, or was any of this stuff carried out in conjunction with the restart and recovery team? Was there any input from that part of the department?
Thanks, Malcolm. Shona?
Sorry, is that in reference specifically to the Annan camp, or about the process in general?
It's the Annan camp in particular, but I think it's an issue that's going to be raising its head over the next couple of years anyway. I mean, it is something that's needing to be looked at, because again, if we're being pragmatic with some of the sites that we're wanting to remove the conservation area status from, perhaps we need to make sure we're flexible and pragmatic when it comes to the town centres, because we don't want derelict falling down buildings.
No, I mean, certainly my understanding is when the work was being done on preparing the Annan camp in particular, there was discussion with colleagues in economic development who were involved in the restart process. I think going forward, it's a good point that Councillor Johnson raises, is that certainly a lot of our town centres and our historic town centres that have conservation areas, the idea behind the appraisal and the management plan is to certainly preserve, but also to improve the appearance of these locations, to make them attractive, but also hopefully to improve visitor numbers as a lovely place for people to come and visit. So we're certainly very aware of that, and the value and the importance that these documents can have. They're very important as well in terms of us being able to apply for hopefully government funding through conservation area regeneration schemes. And I think, as hopefully has been recognised by members today, that the historic built environment has a real important part to play within the economic recovery from COVID, but also the future economic success of a lot of our town centres.
Thank you, Shona. Malcolm, did you want to come back?
No, I think I was really looking for reassurance that that has been considered as part of the thing going forward, and that's what I'm hearing. So I'm happy enough.
Thanks, Malcolm. I'll turn to Councillor Hislop next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to the sort of consultations that we're going through. Who do we actually invite to consult? Because you've got the one in Annan where you've had one response. Is it the case that the public aren't interested, the public don't know about it, or are we not communicating properly with the public so that they do know about it? The other thing is, if we're looking to go out to further consultation on the villages that are being removed, who are we consulting with there? Is it the residents within the conservation area, or is it the residents of the village? Because it's easy if you're not in the conservation area to say that you wish to keep it, where it's more likely that if you're in a conservation area and you want to upgrade your buildings, whether it's the dreaded UPVC windows or whatever, you would be keener to actually see the conservation area removed. So who has the right there to actually say we have a conservation area in that area? Is it the resident or the property owner within it, or the resident out with but still in the village?
You raise an interesting point, Councillor Hislop. So I trust that Shona can assist with the first point. I think on the second one, that may not be quite so straightforward. Shona?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, they're both actually very good and interesting points that Councillor Hislop does raise. We try and engage and consult as widely as possible on all the consultations we do in association with the local development plan, acknowledging at the moment it is harder during COVID with the various restrictions and everything that are in place to try and engage as effectively and as far as we want to. We certainly contact everybody who we think has an interest in the consultation, acknowledging that we maybe haven't quite gone as far as we should in some, so we're happy to take guidance from members on that. In terms of Councillor Hislop's second point, I would think really it should be all residents within the settlement where the conservation area is being recommended for de-designation, rather than just those within the conservation area. Because I think as well it's that important thing to remember that even small, because a lot of our conservation areas were designated back in the 1970s, 1980s, and those small incremental changes through windows, doors, roofs, all that kind of thing over a period of time do have a detrimental impact on the appearance of that location. And actually, if this process raises awareness of the appearance of a village, then perhaps it's a good thing that we should be looking to develop in the future. But we'll obviously be guided by members' final decision as to how we're going to deal with the de-designation of these conservation areas.
Thank you, Shona. Ivor, did you want to come back on that?
Chair, I just think it's a bit sort of hard on people who stay in conservation areas if they wish to come out of them, and somebody who has no financial impact placed upon them and lives out with can put what could be financial impacts on somebody who stays within, because you can't do this but you have to do that, this has to be done that way, and we're already saying that the character of the area has been spoiled anyway, and that's why we're actually removing the likes of one that's to be de-designated, and here we are giving somebody the opportunity to put it back in. And I think it's just a wee bit, it's not fair on the residents. If you've got Dumfries town centre, you've 38,000 people stay in Dumfries, and you'll have less than 1,000 stay in the conservation area, and if you go and plain maths, you're always going to get more folk saying that they'll rather keep it in rather than the ones who stay in there, So I don't think that's fair. It should be the people who are affected who are consulted.
Thank you, Ivor. This has provoked a very interesting debate, I think it would be fair to say. Turn to speakers who wish to come back in, and I will go to Councillor Marshall first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Listening to the debate, I mean, I know we've been affected by COVID, and as Richard says, that we've only had about one animal regeneration steering meeting since in the last year or so, and I can't recall that coming, or it was maybe just a reference. But the fact that the Annan Master Plan that strengthening the spine of the town centre, and which is the main conservation area, is fundamental going forward, as is a number of projects, including we have a section on how we actually bring back into use derelict buildings in the high street and beyond, which covers the conservation area. So if we had been made aware of it, and if we were meeting, we would have actually had that as a dedicated item to discuss, because it runs through the very heart of the Annan Master Plan. I think going forward with recommendations, I think this, CACAMPS, I think should go to area committees. Area committees aren't awash with business. We've got an Arndale and Eskdale area committee tomorrow, and there's 4 real items of business on that. So I don't think there's any harm in actually, for future ones, is actually having those on the agendas of the area committees. And and it's not just relevant to the 4 Arndale South ward members. It is an area committee issue. Annan's the capital of the Arndale and Eskdale region. So just a little bit disappointed that we've not been able to input a lot of things that have been discussed over the years about our frustrations with having a conservation area and what we can do to alleviate that and actually improve the area round about the high street and within the conservation area.
Thank you, Sean. My understanding is that area committee delegations don't at present provide for these consultations going to the area committee. Although I also note that there is an outstanding piece of work for the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee, which we will wish to make progress with, since there was broad agreement at the subcommittee, and there's a few members of it here alongside me, that we needed to have a look at delegations to area committees as a piece of work that I think, had we not had a second lockdown, we would have been into by now. And it strikes me that it might be sensible for us to have a quick look at that in order to address that delegations issue. As I say, it is a piece of work which is outstanding, and the subcommittee needs to pick up and come back to. So I'll leave that point hanging for the moment. I want to go to Councillor Brodie and then Councillor Thompson. Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome the look at the delegations to the area committee. Good. On another point, I was looking through the programme for looking at the CACAMPS, and Gretna is one of the largest settlements. I didn't see that on the list. What conservation area to remember that? See where that is in the process.
Richard, we're losing your signal a bit. We didn't really catch the last of that. Can you can you say that again, please?
Yeah, just could you advise where Gretna can be inserted in the programme, because it's one of the larger settlements in the region.
Okay, Shona, can you assist with that, please?
Yeah, certainly. Gretna doesn't have a conservation area at the moment. There was some work done, I think about 10, 15 years ago now, about the potential to designate a conservation area in parts of Gretna, the older parts of Gretna, and there was overwhelming public opposition to the creation of a conservation area, so it did not go any further.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, please.
I must have got it wrong, because my understanding was that the central part of Gretna had sort of limits on what you could do to the cladding of the buildings and changing the red brick features in the town centre.
Yeah, so thank you. Certainly not through the designation of a conservation area, and it was the central area that we were looking to include within a conservation area, but there is no conservation area at the moment for Gretna.
Thank you, Shona. I'll go to Councillor Thompson next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Really constructive debate, I think. But in terms of area committee, I know there is one of the current delegations is to have input into major local consultations, having regard to the council's community participation and engagement strategy, etc. I appreciate, I think Shona had touched on earlier, the fact that this element in terms of removal doesn't actually in the legislation require a consultation, but I suppose there's a kind of sugary peg there in the sense that this is part of like community participation and engagement. So there is that kind of scope, I suppose, for us to take advantage of that. So maybe that's something we could look at when we review delegations. But I certainly think that there's no reason why we shouldn't at least have the courtesy, and the point was well made about courtesy earlier on, just to be able to use area committees for this exactly this sort of thing. Thanks, Chair.
I'm grateful for the assistance with scheme of delegation. That's why I am so appreciative of your feedback and participation in the review of standing order subcommittee, Councillor Thompson. In my defence, it's maybe been a while since I've chaired an area committee. But I note what you say. I think that that is a reasonable point. It seems to me as though it would potentially be covered. I see Councillor Nicholson's hand up. I'll go to him next. Ronnie. Hi, Ronnie, carry on. I wonder whether Ronnie's maybe having connection problems. I do see his hand raised. Okay, I shall go to Councillor Dryburgh next and hope we can reconnect with Ronnie in due course. Archie. Oh no, Ronnie, you've made it in. Right. Ronnie, you go first, and then I'll bring Archie Dryburgh in. Ronnie. We can't hear you. You don't seem to have any sound. Oh dear. Ronnie, try the chat. Is there any opportunity for you to type in the chat? Okay. So I'm going to go to Archie Dryburgh. Can we see if we can get Councillor Nicholson some assistance with his kit to see if he can get reconnected, please? Would that be possible? In the meantime, I'll go to Archie.
So thanks very much, Chair. Back from my vaccination, all well and good. I just wanted to sort of just check on the previous discussion on Gretna not being a conservation area. My understanding is that Victory Avenue, there is a place in Victory Avenue that does have a conservation area, which used to be the Officers' Mess, and I believe it's sort of between 42 and 52 Victory Avenue, which is a square. So I just wanted to clarify that position, because there has been some planning applications, for instance, which have been, refused because of the type of material that people have been wanting to do. So I just want to clarify that position in specifically Victory Avenue.
Thanks, Archie. Glad the vaccination went well. That's really good. Shona, can you help with that point, please?
Yeah, we'll take that away. Is it 42 to 52 Victory Avenue, Councillor Dryburgh?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we'll take that away and check our records, but I'm not aware of there being a conservation area in Gretna, but we will double check and come back at a later date.
Ronnie, we can hear you now.
Thank you. I don't know what's happening here. If I can remember what I was saying. It's been an interesting debate, and I've no problem with putting the consultation to the area committees and that as well. But I was listening to Ivor, and there was a double-edged sword that, because if you've got 1,000 people that live in an area that has a say, and them out with don't have the say, the 1,000 people will act in their own interests within that. And probably the people in the conservation area, 90% of them knew before they went into that area as a conservation area, so they knew what came with that. And I think there should be some flexibility in what we can do in a conservation area, which may help the people that have issues with the PVC windows or whatever it might be. But again, that could be for another debate, and that might be something that if it comes to area committees, that can be looked at. But to exclude people from out with the area means that they don't have that, especially if you say in Dumfries town, people in Dumfries town use the whole of the area, and they have conservation areas that they like, and it brings something to different areas. But you have the people that just in the conservation area decide what happens in that conservation area. Doesn't help them. It doesn't help the whole aspect of the town, my view.
Ronnie, I take the point. I suppose we would consider it in terms of it being general amenity, and anyone that happens to frequent the conservation area itself, whether they live in it or not, might reasonably have a view on its amenity and the effect that no longer being a conservation area might have on it, or they might live very close to it, albeit not within it. And I think there's also a fair point that unless you've owned your house for a very long time, you would almost certainly have purchased it fully understanding, so long as your solicitor had done a good job, that it was indeed located in a conservation area, and that is not the same as buying a property in a house that does not. I'm going to check just to make sure that we don't have any further speakers, either new comments or anyone wishing to come back in this debate, because I think we need to look at the recommendations quite carefully. So before I do that, before I turn to recommendations, I'll bring Councillor McComb back in. Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, we have a group of statutory consultees in the planning process, which has never been mentioned. The community councils. I wonder if it would be appropriate for community councils to be consulted.
I'll seek some clarification on that. My understanding is that for the conservation area character appraisals, they would be consulted. And for the creation of a conservation area, I believe they would also be consulted, if I recollect the process from Moffat correctly. I think clearly where there's a gap is with the removal of the conservation area. Is that what you're referring to in particular, Jim?
That is precisely what I'm referring to, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. So can we have some clarity on that, Shona? I guess that is up to us to determine, isn't it?
We always, where there is an active community council, we include them in a statutory consultee, as Councillor McComb said, so they are consulted on, as you say, the designation of a conservation area. They would also be probably on the de-designation and the amendment to any boundary. We would include them in that.
Okay, I think that's useful clarification, particularly so far as de-designation is concerned. Archie, can I just check, did you want to come back in?
No, I was wondering why Nick put my name up.
Right, okay. Well, I always want to ensure that we haven't left anybody out. So I am going to turn to the recommendations, but I think we need to work through them quite carefully, because I'm conscious that if we as a committee are minded to include area committees in these sorts of pieces of work, that's a change to our practice. It's also a change partway through, because clearly we have sent out a number of things for consultation already so far as supplementary guidance is concerned, which have not gone to area committees. Now, I think it's perfectly within our gift to make that decision, but I just want to highlight that that is a change. But I will go to the recommendations. 2.1 I think is straightforward. Are we content to note that no responses were received to the Mineral Resources Supplementary Guidance consultation?
Noted.
Take it as we are. I think we have considered to some extent the responses received to the Annan Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan Supplementary Guidance consultation. But I think the question here, if I've understood members correctly, is whether we would then be content to go on to agree with, the council's recommended response, or whether we wish to engage in further consultation on that. I think if I've understood that correctly. And it seems to me that, amongst others, the suggestion is that we would wish to ensure that the Annan Regeneration Steering Group had the opportunity to comment. Am I picking that up correctly?
Yes, if it's not too late.
Agreed.
So I've certainly taken from that the officers have not advised that there's any particular deadline attached to this. Shona, can I just check that is the case? We do have time to do this if we wish.
Yes, we have time, and I'd just like to say as well, I mean, we would welcome consultation on these types of documents, because at the end of the day, it's there for the community and property owners to understand the value of the conservation area and what they need to do to retain that status. So yes, if members want us to do further and wider consultation engagement, we're happy to do that.
Okay, I think that's really helpful and much appreciated. We will need to be clear, I think, on the period of time that we're allowing for this, because it could potentially last for the rest of the year, and I don't think that's what members have in mind. But I'll bring in Councillor Hislop before we maybe get into that. Ivor?
Just a quick clarification. Is there any expense associated with going out to further consultation, and do we have budget for that?
Thanks, Ivor. Fair point. Shona?
The expense would be largely newspaper advert costs, but the rest of it would just be officer time, because I don't imagine we would undertake any sort of event hiring for kind of face-to-face engagement. That would be the only other potential cost, and we don't have a budget for that.
Chair, can I suggest that I think the important thing is the Annan Regeneration Steering Group, and if we could coordinate a response through that. I think it has been out, it's been advertised. For some reason, I can't recollect it coming to Annan Regeneration Steering Group, which is a wide range of people, including the 4 councillors. So if we could get that circulated to the Secretariat of the Annan Regeneration Steering Group, it'll allow all the members, which include that community council representatives, to formally respond to the CACAM.
So that seems to me to be a sensible way forward, if members are in agreement with that.
Agreed.
So there's no contrary view coming up on that. Can I ask, therefore, I think for completeness, would it be possible then for us to have this item come back to our June meeting? I'm sure that would be ample time.
Yeah.
That should be possible. We will do the necessary work to consult the steering group and work out dates as to when deadlines are for reports, as to when we would need any comments back by. Okay,
I think that's very helpful. So members, if we're content, and we have therefore changed 2.2 in as much as we're not agreeing the council's recommended response and proposed modifications today, we're undertaking further consultation with Annan Regeneration Steering Group, and the report on the outcome of that will be brought back to our June meeting. 2.3 therefore also has to change somewhat, in as much as we will need to remove the references to the Annan CACAMP at this point. We would therefore, if I've understood matters correctly, be remitting with powers to Head of Economy and Development to notify Scottish Ministers of the Council's intention to adopt the Mineral Resources Plan as supplementary guidance. Will members be content with that? Okay.
Agreed.
Similarly, at 2.4, we would at this point be agreeing to adopt the Mineral Resources supplementary guidance following completion of the relevant adoption procedures as detailed at paragraph 3.7. Content with that. Alan will follow later. Okay. And at 2.5 then, and again here I think we have to look at some further wording potentially. We have considered the outcome of the conservation area review as detailed at paragraph 313, but in terms of the recommended course of action, there has been a request which I think has been supported pretty much across the piece for consultation with the communities listed. That's in terms of de-designation. Are we content to agree 2.5 on the basis that we undertake consultation with those communities on the same basis as we would do if we were examining the creation or amendment of a conservation area? There has been some debate about who we include and who we exclude from that, but I would take the inclusive approach, likely to be the fairest and most transparent, unless there's a serious divergence of opinion on that. Would members be content to agree amended 2.5 on that basis?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
At 2.6, thank you, members. Agreed programme of work for preparing conservation area character appraisals and management plans as set out in paragraph 3.17, not 3.16. Are we content to agree that? Okay, I will take it that we are. Members, thank you very much. That has been an interesting debate. We will turn now to item 6, and it may be during the consideration of this that we will be pausing for the minute silence, but I'll give everyone notice of that. I am keeping an eye on the time. Item 6 is the Chapel Cross Site Transformation Update report by Director of Economy and Resources. This report provides members with an update on the programme of work to deliver site transformation at the Chapel Cross site, working with partners, and presents a revised memorandum of understanding between the CIS partners for approval, reflecting the progress on the strategic business case for the site and the new role of South of Scotland Enterprise. Members will be aware of the commitment through the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal to develop the Chapel Cross site and the investment to enable future ambitions for the site as a strategic employment location in the region. Mark Fulton is here to assist if members have any questions. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add at this point, please?
No, other than to reference that the growth deal award was last Thursday, and well done to everybody involved. I'd leave it there for now.
Mark, thanks very much. Absolutely a major milestone and very welcome. I will open this to members' questions and comments. Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. I think it was the potential start of a truly transformational opportunity for Dumfries and Galloway with the Chapel Cross site as part of the Borderlands growth deal. Looking at the recommendations and the report itself, I think this is a step forward in the right direction. It gives the partners the opportunity to move forward properly with due diligence and that. And my preference here was to agree the recommendations as is, and go forward that way.
Thank you, Archie. I agree. Conscious there's a great deal of work being happening on this behind the scenes. I will check for any further members. Apologies, Councillor Marshall, and then Councillor Crothers. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, just one small point. Obviously, welcome the announcement last week, and congratulations to everyone that's worked on behalf of getting us to where we are at the moment. I do think moving forward, and I think it has been, we've been up against time trying to get the Borderlands deal signed. But I think now that we have announced projects like the development of the Chapel Cross site, I think within the document, the memorandum of understanding, one important element of that is the stakeholder and communications and that group that will be set up, because I think it's important we start not only speaking to key stakeholders, but also getting the messages out to the wider general public round about the Chapel Cross site.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Chairman. So, just officially, Andrew Wood is Councillor Andrew Wood. That is apologies. So these questions are on his behalf, and that's why I preempted the questions with that. He's got connectivity problems, Chairman, for no other reason. So the questions he was going to ask was, and I think it's page 180, paragraph 4, the governance programme and project management structure. He was asking where are members in regards to that? Have we got a high enough level of members oversight in there? So that was a question from him. It looks as if there's none at all, or it relates back to different mechanisms. So just these are Andrew's questions. So ultimately he'll be listening back to this at some point, listening to the answers that have been given. He also spoke about the advisory group, and it talks about knowledge and skills and experience. He wanted to know exactly what that knowledge, skills and experience was. What is it we're looking for? He didn't see it within the report. And the third point he brought up was that he says that there's no binding legal agreement between the organisations. Does this carry any risk with it? And he put that in the context by saying, if one of these organisations walked away, does that carry the risk that a deal may collapse, a potential project? That was the 3 points he raised, Chair. Thank you very much.
Ian, thanks for that. Mark, can you assist with those questions, please?
Yeah, if I start with the last one first, it's an as an MOU, it's a big step forward from the previous MOU. And if we need to go to a more formal collaborative agreement or a JV or something like that, then that's what we might do in the next stage. But for now, it's thought that between the partners that it's an adequate framework in order for the partners to work together and take the program forward. I mean, those risks and consequences have been discussed, and we think the relationship is such that it's highly unlikely that would happen at this stage. Sorry, what was the second question, Councillor Davidson? The three-part question.
I'll give you that. I'll give him again if you want.
Please, would you mind?
No problem. So what he's saying at page 108, the governance programme and project management structure, where are the members of the council there? He says that it doesn't think they're there. So he just wanted to, is that the case? And he's looking, I think what he's looking for reassurance is, okay, for particular projects to come forward, so use Chapel Cross as an example, but he was thinking across the whole Dumfries and Galloway. Could be Annan, it could be Stranraer. Where are members? How do ward members get updated? Because there's no sign of them there at all. Sorry. That was the first one, and the next one was the advisory group. It talks about knowledge, skills and experience, but it doesn't go into the detail. He was interested with the detail, what we're looking for when it comes to this advisory group. What is the knowledge, skills and experience we're actually looking for? Thank you, Mark.
I mean, thank you. That's a really good set of questions. With regard to the councillor engagement, you'll be aware that we've brought, I think it's 3 or 4, even 5 papers to you in the last 18 months. We've had one stakeholder, one councillor workshop, which, considering the Chapel Cross has been going since 2004, and no papers, I think, were actually tabled to the council, sort of demonstrates that the current team are really keen to make sure that the councillors are inside the fence rather than outside the fence. You may be aware that we have very strong a dialogue through the director with the members on particular issues, or on any range of issues, and you may be aware that we're also cited at the Annan. It was the Annan Steering Committee, Development Steering Committee. We're actually an attendee at that, and also, as Councillor Driver will say, we're an attendee at the Chapel Cross site stakeholder group. So, in terms of line of sight to the community, that's all very clear. So if the councillors feel that there is a need for a different level, then that's a discussion to be had. But we think that what we've put forward is actually fit for purpose, and we'll be keen to make sure that it works through maintaining that dialogue. And the first question was about skills and resources and the like. This is a novel endeavour. It's not the council's business to deliver multi-billion-pound programmes. You will remember from looking at the SOBC that was put to you a few months ago that what we're looking to do is reinvent a future for the site, doing a whole range of things which are novel to the council and the partners. So it makes sense to get support from the big world out there to make sure that we get it right first time and learn from the mistakes of others rather than make the mistakes ourselves. So that's the thinking in that. It's recognizing that we can't do it on our own. We've got to get the right people inside the fence and helping us. Does that help?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I think that is helpful. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. No, thanks very much. But I think there's a couple of things. I think through our spokesperson, Malcolm Johnston, we'll come back to you directly, if that's okay, Chair. I think it's member involvement, how that's a future discussion maybe, and other aspects of what Mark just answered. But I think I think good answers. Andrew will listen back to these, but we'll come back to you directly as well for any future reports that come back to committee.
Chair, can I come in, please?
Yes, Mark, of course.
I'm really keen that we have an appropriate timetable of member workshops. The reason being was the first workshop that we had back in September 2019 was well received, and it was really very helpful from, I think, both sides. So the intention would be to make sure that we've got a forward view on what the workshops are as being a level of engagement. So basically it's an open door for us to pitch to you and for you to talk to us, and for us to have a basically, you know, develop a mature conversation about what we're trying to do. It's a big thing we've got ahead of us, and we need to make sure that the relationship is close, and having the workshops set up and having the best attendance that we can have, recognizing that members are very busy, I think will drive that engagement forward, such that it's all for one and one for all.
Thank you, Mark. I welcome that. I think that is very, very helpful from my perspective. Councillor Marshall, you want to come back in, please?
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Chair, to allowing me back in. It was just one important point to note, and it's just in, you know, obviously it's an updated MOU, but and it is correct at the moment, but and I'm sure Mark will be aware, but under the route map, which, you know, cites up to 2095, there has been a recent announcement by the NDA to look at continuous decommissioning, which means that will probably provide, depending on what's agreed for Chapel Cross, might mean, or it probably looks like meaning, that decommissioning will be continuous and it will happen more quicker, which should really stand the Borderlands project in better stead, because it might allow for parts of the site to be freed up earlier. But as I said, it's current at the moment, it's correct, but it's probably subject to change going forward.
Can I comment?
Yes, Mark, by all means.
That's again a really good point to raise. You might note that within the MOU, it will be kept under ongoing review, but it has, I think, a review point. I think it's every year. It might be more than that. And the reason for doing that is we want to make sure that it aligns with the needs of the programme rather than just stays there as a document. Another strand to it is part of the review is about making sure that it's fit for purpose and it's delivering what we're hoping it was going to deliver. So that's a key point. Your comments about the NDA are well made. The business case that we have actually only plays to 60 of the 210 hectares in terms of the cost benefit allowance and the jobs and what have you. We are expecting to have maybe up to 160 hectares, if not more, available over the growth period term. So confirmation from the NDA that that's the case is a good thing. We've got a fantastic opportunity here. We've got to make something of it. And the route map is set up to be sort of a flexible and agile approach to the decommissioning of the site and making best use of the site that's available, and also recognizing that it may well be that there are numerous users that any one particular area of land has before 2095 is up.
Thank you, Mark. I will pause to check in case there are any further questions or comments from members. Okay, in that case, we will turn to the recommendation. Members, are we content to note 2.1, progress made on the CX site transformation programme since the previous report to this committee in September 2020? And at 2.2, note the importance of the impact of the updated MOU in supporting the approved CX mandate, and the approved CX strategic outline business case as part of the Borderlands includes a growth deal that's outlined in Paris 3.6 to 3.8. Great. 2.3, are we content to agree that the Council is co-signatory to the CX MOU included as Appendix 1 and summarised at paragraph 3.6, which replaces the Memorandum of Understanding approved by the Council in 2017? We're content to agree that? Okay. And then consequently agree that the Leader and Director of Economy and Resources have delegated authority to sign the updated MOU on behalf of the Council, subject to any minor amendments to the final wording agreed with the Legal and Licensing Services Manager. Are we content to agree with that?
Agreed.
Excellent. Members, thank you very much. Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
We will turn to item 7. Item 7 is the Town Centre Living Fund 2021-22 report by Head of Economy and Development. This report seeks agreement to allocate £1 million from council tax second homes income to deliver the 2021-22 Town Centre Living Fund. It also seeks agreement to the priorities and criteria for applications for funding in relation to different aspects of the fund. Jamie Little is here to assist if members have any questions. Jamie, is there anything that you would like to add at this point, please?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing further to add to the report at this time.
Thank you, Jamie. I will go to members' questions and comments. Councillor Drybrough and then Councillor Marshall. And I may interrupt one of you because we are reaching midday. But Councillor Drybrough first, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll be quick on this one. This is obviously the sort of annual report about the Town Centre Fund coming to Economy and Resources, or E&I previous to that, for looking at the grant assistance to tackle specifically below total standard properties and also support housing developments within town centres. I think Jamie has worked with our housing associations in the past extremely well, and the grants that have been given from this fund have really supported, you know, housing in town centres. I'm really pleased with this report, and I'm glad to see that we've got this fund available to support those housing associations and housing providers to improve those particular below total standard properties. So happy to agree, Chair.
Thank you, Archie. Come to you next, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And it's just again, and I've raised this before, I think I raised it the last time, was with the change in places. And whilst I recognise at 3.6.3 that the LDP recognises the following centres, it seems unfair that Eastriggs, which is slightly larger than Thornhill and considerably larger than Whithorn and Wigtown, seems to be excluded from schemes like this. And I would just ask for that to be considered, because if it's done mainly on the LDP, but it doesn't reflect the size of Eastriggs as a community, which is larger than 3 that are on the town centres that have been identified.
Thank you, Sean. Jamie?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the definition used in the local development plan is really meant to act as a bit of a guide towards the future allocations. However, it's not a definitive list of the towns or settlements that we'd look at. What we would do is, if a proposal was to come forward for Eastriggs and that we felt it was delivering on strategic priorities of the Town Centre Living Fund, bring a report to our members seeking their agreement to any allocation of funding. So Eastriggs is still included, and have sought to reference that in the report and the comments around projects that may come forward out with these locations.
Thank you, Jamie. So I guess project-based as well as being geographical. So if something comes forward from Eastriggs, we would consider it. I see you nodding in agreement. That's helpful. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Heslop next, please. Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to paragraph 3.7.1. It's maybe just the timing of the report compared to the work on the projects, but you've got an estimated 8.8 and delivering more than 40. Is it a case that we don't exactly know what we've got there? Or have they not been completed yet and it's just the wording that's been put in?
Thank you, Ivor. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the estimated investment, as these projects are delivered, they can often incur or come across additional barriers that may increase the costs. They may also identify some savings, and there may also be issues around the number of homes. It isn't anticipated that will significantly increase or decrease, but that's the information we have at this time. Once the projects are complete, we're in a position to understand that more fully. But right now, as things progress, these are estimates.
Thank you, Jamie. That is very nearly midday. I make it midday by my watch. I'll invite members to join me in observing a minute's silence, please. Thank you, members. We will pick up where we had left off. Ivor, I don't know if you wanted to come back on Jamie's answer, or if you're content with that.
No, it was just whether the project had been finished. It just, I like sort of accuracy, but if it's not finished yet, then that's why maybe the estimate's there rather than the actual amount. So I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you, Ivor. Go to Councillor Hagman next, please. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Jamie. I've got a question on the below tolerable standard grant on page 197. I've actually got two questions. The first one is on the list down there. Does that also include dry rot? Because I know that there's an issue with dry rot, and we've got rising damp and a whole load of other things. So my question was, who makes up that list? Is that us, or is that a standard one? But my sort of more substantive question is in regards to the 100% grant. Now, it makes reference that the previous budget was fully allocated. There's 44 homeowners registered on the current waiting list, but it makes reference to 100% grant rate for applicants in receipt of council tax reductions for low-income households. And my question is that our stipulation, or is that stipulation coming from elsewhere? And I'm just very conscious that we've got households that are perhaps on tax credits and universal credits, but maybe won't be eligible for council tax reductions. And equally, we've got those who are maybe getting a council tax reduction, i.e. single person occupancy gives you a council tax reduction, but you may not be on a low income as such. So I'm just wondering, is it possible to include those households that are on universal credit and tax credits within that recommendation?
Thanks, Katie. Jamie, can you clarify, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The tolerable standard is set out in legislation. It's in the Housing Scotland Act 2006, and it sets out the criteria. So that's actually stipulated on a national basis. In terms of the council tax for low-income households, so discounts for low-income households, that's separate from single-person discount, which is another form of discount. This is specifically looking at what's available for people who are low-income. They've been through our financial assessment, through our benefits section, or through the DWP. So what we've sought to do is to minimise the impact of carrying out means tests and also focus the funding on those who are really in the most need, and strike that balance. So what we're effectively trying to do is assist people who are on low incomes, but have these challenging property conditions in the best way that we can. It's not a stipulation from elsewhere. It's a suggestion to members as the most effective way of prioritising the funds that are available.
If I could just come back, Chair. Yeah, thank you. I guess my point is, especially around universal credit and the sort of way that that's managed, those who maybe were previously getting housing benefit now sit under universal credit. So if there is an opportunity to look at that, that would be welcomed. But thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I will move on to Councillor Brodie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to comment, support the use of the funds for these properties. It's important that we invest in our town centres, and I think we really need a lot bigger budget going for post-COVID to support businesses in our high street, to regenerate the town centres, help businessmen to improve their property. So when we come to recovery funds, I hope that will be a priority for our council moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. I think it is a good point. Members who were members at the time refer me to previous schemes of various sorts, I guess, in terms of town centre facelifts as part of the response to difficult times in the past. I think it's something we absolutely need to be considering. It appears to me that there will be fairly substantial COVID recovery funds coming from different sources, and no doubt with their own different criteria attached to them. My preference, as I've reflected on an earlier item, is for councils to have the maximum of discretion. That sometimes happens, it sometimes does not. Nevertheless, I think there will be a task for us to ensure that we maximise the impact and best use of that funding to really have the best effect on our town centres in helping them to restart and recover. But I think also to no small extent to reinvent themselves in a way that gives them a vibrant and thriving future. Town centre living is part of that, without a doubt, but I think the issues that you allude to will be part of these considerations as well. I think the one without the other will not get us to the outcomes that we would want. But I hope that's helpful in broad policy terms. I'll turn to Councillor Johnson, please. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Again, like Councillor Brodie, welcome this expenditure as laid out. The thing is, my understanding is that the council tax income on second homes is 1.4 million, and we're spending £1 million of it on this. Now, we seem to get quite a massive multiplier through this. We're talking in terms of getting leaving in £9 million worth of funds from what we're proposing to allocate today. So the other 400,000 from the second homes tax, that would be another 3.6 million worth of increase. I don't know whether when it was established that we were going to use the money from the second homes, whether we were going to be using all of it or whether it was just a part of it that was going to go forward for this. But the other thing I'm interested to find out is, have we any indication of the number of below tolerable standard houses we have in the region? How many grant applications you could expect?
Thank you, Malcolm. The settling on £1 million, I think that certainly took place some time ago. And from memory, which is an imperfect date, it was based on what we thought we were likely to be able to sustain on an ongoing basis. Clearly, if we're now doing rather better than that, then it's undoubtedly something that should be examined. But I think the £1 million had been settled on the basis that we were fairly confident that we would be able to sustain that for a significant period. I guess recognising that you need to do this programme over multiple years to have a real impact. On the numbers of below tolerable standard properties, Jamie, is that something that you can assist with, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the number of below tolerable standard properties across the region, we don't have a definitive figure. What we recognise through the Scottish Housing Condition Survey is, for a number of reasons, Dumfries and Galloway suffers from a higher than average level of below tolerable standard properties. It can be down to the build time. Older properties do tend to suffer worse, as members would expect. In addition, rural properties also suffer more from the elements, so we do have additional challenges in this area. What we certainly recognise is through the creation of the grants is that there is significant demand, and there are multiple requests that come forward for it, and we do try to manage the budget as effectively as possible within the constraints that we have. In terms of the overall income from council tax on second homes that's generated year on year, that amount is subject to fluctuation based on a number of factors, including collection rates and the number of properties that happen to be registered as second homes at the time. There is also funding recommendations made from that income through the Housing Scotland Act Scheme of Assistance, and just due to timing this year, the report is going to full council on Thursday, making a number of recommendations to support projects from this income as well. It would normally come through Economy and Resources, but due to timing of committees, that's not been possible this year.
I'm grateful for the reminder, Jamie, as I think that obviously yet to be agreed by full council would be a number of areas. I think handyvan, food train extra, trusted trader scheme. There are a number of, I think, quite worthy things that members have supported fairly consistently, that also come from those overall funds. But Malcolm, I hope that is helpful.
Thank you, Chair. It was just sort of a bit of clarity about, I understood. I got the information about the income from the second homes. It was just a wee bit of clarity as to how it was allocated. That though.
Thanks, Malcolm. I'll go to Councillor Hislop, please. Ivor.
It's just in the back of an answer Jamie gave there. Do you find that the older houses in town centres are restricted or can be more below tolerable standards because of the cost inflicted by having to meet the conservation area objectives or listed building objectives, things like that?
I see what you're driving at, Councillor Hislop. Jamie?
I would say it's probably the case that the conservation area designation and the requirements from a planning perspective, they do have the potential to increase some of the costs. But what we're obviously keen to do is to make sure that we provide the support to also look at those wider objectives around maintaining the built environment within a town centre. I think that's a significant factor. It may in some cases increase the cost, but then there will be additional benefits that are born from that as well.
Thanks. Thank you, Jamie. Members will go to the recommendations. Okay, so are we content to agree 2.1, allocation of £1 million from the council tax and second homes budget to deliver the 2021-22 Town Centre 11 fund? Okay.
Can I just interject a moment, Chair? Sorry, it's Nick Evans here.
Yes,
David Ingalls has indicated he wished to come in.
David, my apologies. I was looking at the wrong screen. I tried to avoid that. Carry on, please.
No, at all, Chair. Yeah, I do. I too welcome this investment in our town centres. Yeah, we all know that the town centres are really struggling, and I think that was a valid point that was made about conservation areas. We might find it's difficult to bring in private investors, into town centres now to regenerate buildings, and there may be a reliance on third sector organisations and communities themselves to take on derelict buildings on the main street. I just wonder, Chair, whether £1 million is actually enough of an investment in our town centre economies. Whether that's something in the future we could look at increasing that investment, perhaps doubling it.
So I think we would either need to look at that through the budget in subsequent years, or potentially through some of the recovery funding that we know is coming. Whether that would be sufficient to get us to a doubling of this particular fund would, I think, be a moot point. We do know that there is substantial resource coming to us. Some of it's with us already, some of it is still on its way. But which I'd referred to, I guess I was alluding to in responding to Councillor Brodie. I mean, I don't believe any member here has any difficulty in investing more in town centres. And in my own view, certainly, in investing more in town centres to enable people to live in them. But I think we would need to look carefully at how we get from 1 million to 2 million in order to make that happen. But no resistance from me in that regard. Although I recognise that's not the same as issuing a cheque today, David.
No, I appreciate that, Chair. But I think when we say we're going to build a local economy, our town centres are really at the heart of that. And this is something that, when you consider £1 million across the region, it's not a vast amount of money, to invest in our local economy.
I take the point. I think perhaps it's as much a reflection of where we have come from in terms of our ability to allocate resource in the past, as it is what we are now potentially dealing with, which is considerably more resource, albeit for a relatively limited period. It's not so very long ago that it was really, had it not been for the council tax and second homes money, it would have been difficult, I think, for the council to have allocated anywhere near that sum on a recurring basis, as we succeeded in doing. However, I take your point, circumstances are changing, at least for the time being, and we should look carefully at how we get the best effect out of that money while we've got it and the opportunity. And I anticipate we'll want to look at that very carefully and fairly briskly as well, I think it'd be fair to say.
Thanks, Chair.
Still, if I can move to the recommendations then, and my apologies for not having seen you, David. I usually try and check the screens assiduously. We had agreed, I think, 2.1. Are we content to agree 2.2? That is to allocate 500,000 to support housing developments that will contribute to the regeneration of town centres. That's as at paragraph 3.6. Okay. 2.3 to allocate 300,000 to provide grant assistance to the owners of empty properties in and around town centres to help bring them back into use as housing. That's subject to detailed criteria. Paragraph 3.7.
Agreed.
And finally, 2.4 to allocate 200,000 to provide grant assistance to tackle below tolerable standard properties across the region, again subject to detailed criteria. That's at paragraph 3.8.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just remind, obviously, that David made a really good point there, but we've also got the Borderlands £2 million town centre fund that's probably coming our way as well, which is probably some of the budgets you were discussing anyway.
RJ, that's a very good point, actually. Yes, there is, I think, substantial resource on its way to us, which I think will really assist with these objectives. And I think it's really heartening that there's there's a broad general agreement across the chamber, virtual chamber albeit, that these are the sorts of priorities that we want to be taking forward. I'm really encouraged by that. Right, David, did you want to come back in? I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick one. I actually made a point there about the places fund. I appreciate that. We know that money's coming through, but we don't know where that money is going to be spent at present and whether it's likely to touch all towns or all decent sized towns in the area. So there will be towns will fall out with that funding.
Again, I would go back to my point to Councillor Brodie. We need to, as part of the work we do in this, ensure we're aligning all of the available resources so that we don't leave places out. A settlement might not receive something from one particular fund, whether it's Borderlands or something else. But again, if there is evidence need and there are projects we can support, we need to be looking at how we can do that from whichever fund happens to be available. I think there are a couple that have been announced by the UK government just over the past couple of weeks, for example. It would surprise me very much if there weren't further announcements, at least in terms of manifesto commitments from most parties, with respect to the forthcoming Scottish Parliament elections. We need to see what happens with them and what thereafter comes forward. But I don't think that COVID recovery is going to be an area of activity that will go away. There is, I think, in short, a lot of work that we will need to do in aligning these funds and making sure the money's spent to good effect right across the region. That, I think, is also a debate that's been good to have today. It's a debate we will be returning to in future meetings of this committee, indeed returning to it before the summer recess. However, for the time being, I will move on to item 8, and final item on the agenda, which is Economic Development Capital Programme 2020-2023 Monitoring and Progress Report. The report is by Head of Economy and Development. And this report provides information on the progress of expenditure for 2021 within the economic development asset class, that's up to December 2020. We're also provided with an update on the allocations of funding for projects progressing through the Town Centre Capital Fund across the region, along with an update on proposed adjustments to some of that funding to enable projects to proceed. Simon Fieldhouse and Melissa McGarry are here to respond to any questions members may have on the report. Before I open it up to members' questions, Simon, Melissa, welcome. Is there anything that either of you would like to add, please?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add at this moment in time.
Thank you, Simon. I'll go to members' comments and questions. Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And in particular, I'm looking at the allocation to Grant Radio Community Partnership. I have to put some more information onto that. In that, the Radio Community Partnership are looking at a 4G pitch, and they've already raised significant funds for this from other areas. I would hope the members would support this. It's something in the region of a £560,000 project, and they're about £40,000 short at the moment of reaching their target should South of Scotland Enterprise support them. And I'm really hopeful that the committee would agree to this, because this will be a fantastic opportunity for Gretna and the surrounding areas, rather than families having to travel 80-mile round trips to 3G, 4G pitches for their areas. It also supports our other priorities like the health and well-being of our region, and I hope that members in the committee will support this particular part. But as for the rest of the report, I think it's pretty straightforward here, and I'm sure Councillor Marshall will be pleased to see Eastrig's actually on 2.6 as well.
Thank you, Archie. I have Councillor Hislop next. Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a wee bit of sort of monitoring of some of the projects that have been going on in the past. I think we usually get a report at Area Committee with regard to the 6-month monitoring, etc. Is there any chance that we could maybe get an individual report on the Area Committees with regard to these ones, or a bit more information on each one? Usually it's just if there's a slight change in the thing, but just the background. If you look at Appendix 4, there's about 5 or 6 there from Nithsdale, just to see how they're getting on, even if it was to say if it's been affected by COVID and how it's been affected, the seat being a longer term project than what they thought. And if that could come to the Area Committee at the usual time, I think what did this month coming, or the next one maybe, for P&R coming to Nithsdale, just to give us a fuller flavour of how well this money's improving the area. What's being done, where we're going with it.
Ivor, thanks for that. I see Mr. Rogers has activated his camera. Steve, it seems like a reasonable point. I think, can we accommodate that? I think it would be helpful to members.
Yeah, Chair, and certainly this is something that will be picked up through the next round of performance reporting to area committees. I think there is the intention to move towards the inclusion of much more narrative in those performance reports, and for our next scheduled performance report, we'll ensure that there is additional narrative on some of those key projects, as Councillor Hislop has suggested there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Ivor, I hope that's helpful. I think it's a valuable point. Personally, I prefer narrative to numbers because I'm better at reading than I am at counting. But I do think that would be useful to have that fuller information to area committee. So glad that can be accommodated.
Thanks for that.
I will check in case there are any further members or hands raised. Checking both screens. Okay, in that case, members, we will go to the recommendations. So are we content to note at 2.1 the expenditures under the Economic Development Asset Class Capital Programme from April to December 2020 as set out in Appendix 1? At 2.2, to note the project progress updates as set out in Appendix 2. At 2.3, note the grant allocations on to the agreed shortlist of projects for Town Centre Capital Fund 2021 as set out in Appendix 3. At 2.4, note the adjusted allocations for Town Centre Capital Fund 2019-20, that's as set out in Appendix 4. And then at 2.5, we're asked to agree to increase by 35,000 the allocation of grant to Radio Community Partnership to include £25,060 from Town Centre Capital Fund 2019-20, with a balance of 9,940 to be allocated from the Town Centre Capital Fund 2021, as detailed in paragraph 4.8. Are we content to agree that? Okay. And finally, at 2.6, to note that the overall grant fund from the 2019-20 and 2020-21 allocations of 2.077 million is now fully allocated to Town Centre regeneration projects in Langham, Lockerbie, Gretna, Eastriggs, and in Dumfries, Thornhill, Dalbeattie, Castle Douglas, Kirkcudbright, Wigton, Whithorn, and Stranraer, as detailed in paragraph 4.9. And I think I will not be alone in welcoming that broad geographical spread of that economic benefit right across the region, recognising that members will want to get detail to their respective area committees. We're content to note that. Okay, members, thank you very much. I can advise I have no other business deemed urgent due to the need for a decision. So I will draw matters to a close there. And thank you very much for your attendance and contributions today. Thank you.